Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please do subscribe and share. That's how we get the word out. That's how you and others can grow. And by all means, pick up your copy of Planetary Citizens, Awakening the Heart of Humanity. It will absolutely light up your life. Thanks for tuning in. Now, this week's guest is Dr. Michael Pravika. He is an amazing man who's into hyperdimensional physics of all things. He's a graduate of Harvard with experimental condensed matter physics. I had to read that over again so I could remember it. And what a fascinating field. He's also got a bachelor's from Caltech in physics and mathematics. He is a very smart guy that we're going to have some conversations with that you're going to want to stick around for. We'll be right back. Do you ever feel like you're in your 40 days and nights in the desert? Well, many do. There's too much frustration, pain, and suffering in the world today. And I help people through that to find joy and happiness in their lives, to create action plans, and find a way to achieve their goals. I've done that with many. If my reputation online is anything like I show up in person, you've got a great score here.
Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Michael, it's so great to have you here. A good friend of mine, Victor Kista, pointed out an article of yours that was published recently, and I was like, I got to talk to this guy. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you for the interest in hyperdimensionality and some of my ideas.
Well, kind of, we live in that space, right? It's no longer liminal. It's
Yeah, no, yeah.
ubiquitous once we figure it out. It's saying that, okay, so let's back up a little bit. We have these conversations to enlighten and inspire others to explore that inner world that they don't have much time or space to talk about because they're usually, especially if there's weird shit going on in their lives. Who are you going to talk to? Ghostbusters? No, I don't think so. You might find a few, disincarnates to have a chat with. But when you're talking reality and the person on an everyday basis, they don't have the direct experience to handle the conversation. So with us, I think there's a lot more potential in that. In that potential, and I know with your background, you've had to have had an early experience of interconnectedness that you may or may not have understood, and yet it was an experience that you had. Do you remember what that was like and kind of where it led you initially in your cognition of reality?
Yeah, I mean, when I was very young, I had grandparents that really loved me, and I used to love to hang out in Niagara Falls, Canada, where my mother grew up and where they lived. And I remember this is where Tesla's hydroelectric at first was successful at
Hmm.
Niagara Falls. And I remember walking, I didn't go into the power stations, but I remember walking by the power stations and always just having this sense of electricity as being this amazing phenomenon. And of course, I'm an Orthodox Christian, so I've always had that spiritual desire, to connect with God. And so, I mean, as far as early childhood experiences, I have memories when I was a little kid and like I was an infant with my mother and being on the beach and when I was probably about a year, 14 months old. So, I mean, those are things that I would correlate with. You ask my parents and they're like, yeah, you actually were on the beach and you played with the little Volkswagen car. And so I had a very strange like
Well,
memory that
phenomenally, you have a memory that's that,
at that age. Yeah.
yeah, really.
Yeah, and so that was always of interest to me. As a child, I mean, I just, I I always had interest in physics, and my father was a chemistry professor. So it was cool. I could ask him questions, what is energy? What is light? How does energy transfer? And he'd be like, well, those are questions that a physicist would ask. And so, I mean, I think he was always hoping I would be
There
a
you
physicist.
go, right? You're on your path already.
Yeah, but I mean, as a youth, I guess I thought that physics was going to be the answer to everything. And as I got older, I realized that's not quite the case. It's the way our universe was put together. But I've
Well,
realized
yeah,
there's
and
much
it may not
more.
answer everything, but it sure gives you a lot more questions.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I remember in high school, I was on the math team, and I was the oralist. So I would basically be the oral contender for various competitions. And I think it was my senior year, I had non-Euclidean geometry was the topic.
Mm.
And I remember having this book, and it was a college book. It was a small book, maybe 150 pages, but I went through this book. My calculus teacher gave it, loaned it to me, and he said, "You just cover this book as much as you can, and then this will get you ready for non-Euclidean geometry." And I remember I ended up doing the whole book, but there was one problem I couldn't solve. And then that ended up being on the oral exam, that one problem. And so I did a strategy that it's a long story, but there were 3 problems. I could do the first 2 problems, no issues. And so I spent all my time doing the 2 problems, and then I sort of just winged it. We call it just faking it for the third. And I won the competition. So I learned from non-Euclidean
Well,
geometry that
yeah, well, you
easy
retained
to
enough, right?
yeah,
I don't know if folks realize this, whatever you take in, it's there,
yeah.
right?
Yes,
It's a file system. It's just your ability to pull that file at the right moment and get
correct.
out of the way.
Absolutely. And I also read a book called Flatland, which is I believe Edwin Abbott, beautiful book from the 19th century about life as a 2-dimensional creature that gets visited by a 3-dimensional creature. And so this is kind of where my interest in
Sure.
dimensionality. What would it be
Well,
like if
yeah,
we
that would spark the curiosity of
it,
a brilliant mind, right?
yeah.
Which you must
No,
have had already to even have that inkling that, oh, wow, I want to question these things.
well, as a physicist, I've always had questions. My whole life,
Sure.
I've just asked questions, and I answer questions to my best of my ability as a professor. So it's kind of where science starts, and where I think spirituality also starts. It's just,
I
why are
think
we
it
here?
bridges. I
Yeah,
think as long as when we can find a bridge, it all fits. If
yeah,
we can't, then we're not asking the right questions yet.
correct. And so
Now,
I just, I accept the fact, like Isaac Newton would have said, I'm only exploring some pebbles on the beach. And then I realized the infinity of the pebbles before me. But studying mathematics and then getting into things like Hilbert spaces and higher dimensions, which are, and like string theory, then it becomes like you realize it's very natural mathematically, that we have hyperdimensions, at least from the standpoint of
mhm.
mathematics. And then then like sort of
Well,
like
it's
in the
one thing
spirit,
to articulate that, right? You've got the
yeah,
math and the science and being able to understand that first of all. It's the
correct,
articulation of it
right,
and then having an experience of it, right?
yeah,
Because you can have all of the theory until you have a
yeah.
direct experience that connects everything and gives you the next set of questions.
Absolutely. And I've had those type of experiences. I had an uncle that had passed away. Around 2015,
Hmm.
and but one night I didn't know he had passed away, and it was like in the
Showed
early
up in your
morning.
bedroom, huh?
Yeah, I was in my bedroom, and I had this dream, and I hadn't seen him for years, and I see him, and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And I remember this vividly, and I see this kind of a light at the end of a sort of a, like you're in a basement or in a tunnel or something, this very bright light. And unfortunately, we had sort of drifted apart, but so, we had this strange experience, and I said, "What are you doing?" And then I woke up, and then I was like, "Oh, I just had this sense about me, like
Yeah,
something
like,
was not
damn, I
right."
missed a
I'm like,
good conversation, right?
"Yeah, I should check into it, see what he's up to." And then I found out that morning he had passed away. So things like that definitely are clues that,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that there's
If
no
I could,
question that we
I
connect on higher levels.
I had a similar, even a little more intense. I had a dear friend that I grew up with. We moved from Indiana to Phoenix, and I think 3 weeks after we were here, he was killed in a motorcycle accident. And
Sorry.
his girlfriend and their child was with another friend of ours, mutual, and they moved to Phoenix prior. So we were having dinner with them, talking about it, and Bob had said that he'd had an experience with one of his friends who had passed of a brain tumor, and they made a pact for him to come back and uh, let him know what the other side was like. And so he went through that, and it made me go, interesting. So my wife, we finished dinner, they leave, we're laying in bed. I think my wife's asleep. I'm laying there thinking about my friend, and I went into prayer. I said, Jesus, if it be your will be done. Can I talk to Steve?
Yeah.
And so I started projecting, Steve, are you out there? Steve, can you hear me? Louder and louder, right? Nothing. And then I thought, oh, well, there's probably a few Steves out there. Don't know he'd recognize my voice in the din. He had a nickname though, it was Blab. And
Well,
so,
I missed that one.
Blab, are you
Yeah.
out there? Can you hear me, man? I hear. Bruce, is that you? And bing, right in the center of my vision, eyes closed, is his face. And at the same instant, my wife raises up off her, now ex, she raises up off her pillow and says, what are you doing? And I said, nothing. Why? And then she says, I just saw Steve's face. I tried blinking my eyes. He wouldn't go away. Dark room, right? No lights. I had tears running down my face because it was so real to her and me. Then I said to her, here's the skeptic coming in, medically, it's been proven the body loses 21 grams of weight immediately upon cessation of light. Weight has mass has form. I wonder if we can see him with our eyes open. And she says, I don't know, scares me. I'm going back to bed. You can do what you want. So I laid back down, eyes closed. I'm looking out over the end of the bed. And I said, can I see you? Right. And this mist begins to take shape. And within a few moments, his body, full body, is standing there. Flannel shirt, jeans, long hair, just like he looked. And all I could say, pardon the French, is far fucking out, man. This is great. Now tell me, can you travel with a thought? My first question. And I see Trails going out of the room, Trails coming back into the room. There he is again. And again, all I could say is far fucking out, man. Now, wait a minute. And I know how powerful my mind can be. Am I actually projecting you there, or are you really there? And no sooner did I ask the question, the sheets on the end of the bed moved. I felt the end of the bed dip. My focus was a little tighter, and he's got his foot up on the end of the bed, elbow in his hand on his knee, chin in his hand, smiling at me like a Cheshire cat. And he says, how's that?
Wow. That's
So
interesting.
at that point, I couldn't handle the energy anymore. I had to get up and walk. And so I still had the conversation for a couple hours, and I had been on the other side. So I think that's why things kind of connected, and we had a discussion about his possibilities there, because he was still a newbie at that point. So those kinds of things, that happened in 1981. When you have those kinds of things, and like your experiences as well, it opens up that door to further questions and exploration. Now, where did you go with that in studying that fourth area, if you will, beyond the three?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like you say, it was natural to think about this just from a mathematical perspective. But I also just wondered, how is it that we have this ability with the brain that we have that's finite volume to, for example, imagine infinite volumes, where even physicists talk about parallel universes that might be connected by wormholes and separated in time, where you could go back and see yourself 20 years ago or maybe 20 years ahead. So those kinds of questions always, like, how is it that we can imagine this even though we're three-dimensionally based creatures? And so, and then these moments of inspiration that people have where, all of a sudden you get this brilliant idea. And Tesla even said, that our mind is like a receiver and a transmitter too, I believe.
It's a
And so
transceiver, right? Well,
it
the
is.
entire body Body,
Yes,
mind, spirit,
yes,
it's
yes.
all a transceiver.
Yeah. And so where do these ideas where we can think outside of the box, where we can, because we're not rational creatures by nature, we're actually irrational. And that's what allows us to have this incredible creativity to
Right.
create something from nothing.
Emotionally driven.
Yes. And so, but we do learn rationality. I'm not saying that we don't learn rationality, but when you're a baby, you're not rational. You're just, you
Mm-mm.
cry, you're trying to, you're a scientist because you're figuring things out,
Oh
but
yeah. You're
you're
trying to
not,
figure out how to navigate, right? Get up and
Right,
walk
right,
to begin
right,
with.
exactly. That's the first thing, that you got to do as an infant. So these kinds of questions I began to realize that no, there's something outside of this universe. And I would often to be teaching physics, and I would ask my students would ask me, Doc, you talk about the Big Bang, but what is the universe expanding into? And I couldn't answer those questions because it's metaphysics. I
Sure.
can't do an experiment outside of this four-dimensional space-time continuum. But I,
Now, do
you
you
know,
hold that we're kind of do you hold that we're a reflection of the universe and that we're intricately woven into it, and as it expands, we do too?
I think that our bodies have evolved. I'm not against evolution. I'm as a scientist, but I think we have a different component that we call the soul, and our body is firmly connected to, at least I believe, in the four-dimensional space-time. But our soul is not. Our soul can transcend
Infinite.
anything.
Yeah.
It's infinite. And so, if you think of the universe as like a painting, and then God is the creator is sort of painting, and we're inside that painting. Our bodies are tethered, but our soul is not. Our soul comes from that creator, and that allows the creator to connect with us. Actually, it's physics because it's an interaction. We have gravity, for example, our bodies have mass, and that allows us to interact with the earth.
Right.
In the case of
Well,
the
we
soul,
are the earth, right? Every cell in our
yeah,
body comes
yeah,
from
came
mother.
from yes, but the Earth is in some sense stardust, so we're also stardust at the same time. But it's again that component of our that I call the soul, which I believe is hyperdimensional. That gives you
Mhm.
the imagination to transcend. What would it be like living in 5 dimensions or 6 dimensions?
Well,
It's
that's
not
why
that you. I'm sorry.
cosmic consciousness, right? That that
Correct.
that gives us that ability, and like we were talking earlier about the Vedas, we're given this, we're all divine threads connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, what's that mean? We're
Correct.
capable of loving fully.
Yes. Correct. And that's really the real message is that God gives us love and we share that love with each other. And just
Mhm.
like,
We call it
plants,
love. It's just energy.
it's energy. It's a perfect energy. It's an
Yeah.
energy from the creator. But the thing is in this universe that we are always, ever since the Big Bang 13.5 billion years ago, energy's been converting from one form to the other,
Hmm.
temperature, particles. And so that energy is different. And in fact, you could argue that time is something where you have that, it's just simply conversion of energy, whereas God's energy doesn't involve time. It's timeless. And so because it's perfect. And so we receive that perfect energy and then we share it amongst each other, but we're unique because we can
Well,
receive it because we can
perfect
couple.
example of that, right? Is you're sitting in a classroom, you have a moment where you think you're just blinking, right?
Correct.
And you have an entire week's worth of stuff
Yes.
happen in your head. And then
You
all of a
got
sudden
it.
you open your eyes up and you're back where you
Yeah.
were, right?
Right.
And less than
Right.
10 seconds has transpired.
Correct. So I have another theory related to the hyperdimensionality of waves and human behavior. So if you look at the brain and how it acts, I have argued there's a thing called the brain wave function, and it's
Hmm.
waves. And so if one argument I have for creativity is like, how when you're in the shower and you're singing or just doing nothing, and all of a sudden something you've been thinking about for weeks pops into your head, basically your brainwave function expands and it can access other solutions in what I might call the Hilbert space of ideas,
Hmm.
which might entail the hyperdimensionality, the thinking outside of the box. But the essence is you're relaxing. So now the brain is
Right.
able to sample these solutions, and now you figured it out and you can come back to where you were and solve the problem. And so that's just something that is why we need to rest, why we need to, the seventh day God rested. And so the essence is that we're defocusing the wave,
Is it
not burning.
rest or just being still?
Well, yeah, but even if you look
Right?
at, how they say the restless spirit, The restless spirit comes from waves that are reflecting like in a pond, and you have standing waves. That's our essence, is this the restless spirit. So I even have a theory of happiness, and it has to do with expansion of these waves. Your happiest moments are when you're just not focused. You're just literally, you're in
Yeah, you're
the
just being.
universe. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fully present, you're being.
Yeah.
Doing comes
Correct.
afterwards because you're just being, and what essentially, I don't want to use the word need, but that's
Yeah.
what comes up. It's what you need to do next shows up in
Yeah.
front of you.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a
Absolutely. And you
breadcrumb,
have to work at it.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sort of where then that, morphed into that idea of that I can explain many aspects like autism or multiple personality issues or ADHD based on this brain wave function. So I've actually written a paper on it, and I'm waiting to see. I submitted it to this famous philosophical journal because it starts with the wave particle duality, and that's one of
Right.
the most important paradoxes or just aspects of physics that anything can be looked at as a particle and a wave. So I'm saying, okay, whereas most people would look at matter as just an assembly of particles, atoms,
Mhm.
nuclei, protons, electrons, I'm saying, no, they're all waves. And forget about the particles. Particles are confined waves. And so then the idea is, if you now take that based on this principle, just philosophically, now
Mhm.
look at the body as a hologram, an interference pattern of these waves.
No,
And then
like
we,
Tom Campbell, where does the Avatar, right?
yeah, okay,
Where does um, the creation take place? Because
right,
as we're, let me ask it in a better question.
sure,
Where does awareness come in?
yeah. So awareness or consciousness is an awareness of past, present, and future, and simultaneously. And it is a higher, I believe, a higher dimensional aspect where you are connected to the creator, perhaps even all of the creation, his creation.
Hmm.
And then you have that sense of your place, that you are part of that. You are linked in to the bus, to like the bus, the electrical bus. You are connected, as Tesla would say. You're the transceiver of this massive energy, this massive knowledge of something that's been around forever. And so that awareness is powerful, because then we realize we're all special, we're all unique, but we're all
Sure.
connected through that
Absolutely. Now,
hyperdimensional.
how do you ascribe, or would you ascribe to a theory that says, okay, we're each created uniquely. We each have a purpose. Are we each like the Vedas say, a thread in the tapestry that has our own perfected form, fit, and function in the world that we're just not aware of until we start seeking purpose?
I think so. I think that struggling for these kinds of, just struggling in general,
Hmm.
why am I suffering? Why am I bearing this cross?
Well, we're told
I
that's optional, right?
Well, sure, but I think it brings us closer to our creator. And so what the essence is that by seeking this knowledge, by seeking this connection, and that's where you develop higher awareness, in my opinion. We have free will. And so that
Mhm.
free will is very powerful. It's quantum. It's like related to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You just don't know how a person's going to act. But the point is that I have actually an explanation for this.
But you can know
Analogy.
how you're going to act. You have
Right.
that free will to make the choice of how you respond.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the point is, since we're all connected, then one of the things that you realize with that free will is, can you make the world a little bit of a better place, or are you going to make it a worse place? The
Hmm.
creator doesn't want this. He wants this, that we all
No,
grow
but like the
together.
Mayans say,
Yeah.
in La Quetzalcoatl, it's I am another you, basically. So when you see the mirror in yourself, what you're not seeing in the other is what you need to work on in yourself, or what you're seeing in the other you don't like, is
Right.
usually what, and it gives you that opportunity of working with that part of you and treating it with love instead.
Correct, correct. So I like to look at, like, now I have a little bit of physics where we talk about black bodies where they freely receive energy and give up energy, like the sun,
Hmm.
approximately, and or like an oven. Okay, so now the
We're not
point
going to get
is,
into the boson, are we?
Well, now we won't get into it, but just very, sort of superficially,
Sure.
the essence is that we are radiators. We receive energy, and we have a choice. Are we going to radiate that love, or are we going to try and be selfish and keep it to ourselves? The problem is keeping it to yourself is like taking a selfie. You're reflecting that energy. You're not
Well, it's
giving it.
like, you're given the talents. That's not
Yeah,
using them, right? That's
correct.
hoarding them rather than sharing them.
Correct. And then when you don't share it, you become cold. You lose. All you want is to receive love, but not to give it. And the problem with that from a physics perspective is it doesn't work. Then you lose the interaction. The earth pulls on me, but I also pull on the earth because we mutually interact. So
Exactly.
everything in the universe is mutual. The problem is with humans is because of free will, we can disconnect that mutuality and that selfishness, and that's not going to end up well for the
No.
human,
And
and it's
that's
not going
usually
to.
because we've been traumatized when we were younger in some way, shape, or form. So we're afraid to be open because we've been taught that you can't be.
Correct. I agree with you, and I was taught that too. We're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to get emotional as guys, and I think it's wrong. I
Well,
think it
shoot, I
actually.
cry at commercials.
No, I'm not. Look, I'm not proving anything to anyone.
Yeah.
I am who
Well,
I
we
am.
can't, right? All we
Yeah,
can do is invite them to explore.
right. But I think that part of the essence of being a human is to have emotion, to have sadness, to have happiness, and to share love. And so, I mean, from a physics perspective, I can actually understand it, and so,
Right.
and
Well,
I think it's
and the math's
powerful.
there too, right? It just makes sense. Now, how can we? So here's science and spirituality bridging
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yes.
proof, right? Now,
Absolutely.
here's another question that I have, and I don't know how much you mentioned the brain.
Sure.
And what I found, I thought was really intriguing because you're talking right brain, left brain, which is what most people talk about, right? Analytic and creative side. And then there's a corpus callosum, which is the transceiver in between. What's interesting is that at either end of the corpus callosum is the hypothalamus and pineal.
Yes. 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 So I have a theory about that too, related to the wave. So when you dream, your brain, because it's the most amazing machine computer we know of in the universe.
Hmm.
So it needs to take a break because you're literally like electrical circuits. You don't want to overload it during the day. You're getting receiving images, you're processing them, you're giving responses and commands. So the point is the brain needs a break. So that brainwave function that I mentioned collapses, I believe, into the pineal gland. The pineal gland is something different. I don't think it's connected like you with the usual neural circuitry. So it's like a free wave running. The problem
Hmm.
with the brain is you have these circuitry, and so it's like you have these phases and everything, but they get controlled because of the
Right.
synapses, because of
Right.
dopamine, all those
Well,
kinds of
and
things.
there's another conspiratorialist group out there that says, oh, that we're set up they're trying to calcify our pineals, right? Which I'm like, no, you're just not making the right choices. You haven't figured it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, well, I think you are, your essence is physical and mental. I mean, healthy body, healthy mind, and vice versa. So, of
Right.
course, we
Well,
do
we're a
need to.
holistic unit. We're connected to
We
everything.
are. We are a connected unit. We are a hologram of love, a hologram of this energy. And so the point is that, of course, we do have to worry about what we eat. But I mean, the pineal gland, I mean, the body filters things too. Calcium gets stored in bones and stuff like that, not like in the brain as much. So, but yeah, the pineal gland is, I think, where you have this perhaps a hyperdimensional link where you're this free
Well,
running
it's got
wave.
to be somewhere, right? There
Yeah,
has to be some physical link plug-in, if you will,
yeah, sure.
to that um, cosmic computer, let's say,
Sure. No,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the soul is more than that. I mean, it's a link. Yes, absolutely. But remember, we can't see 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional, and on bodies. So it's like,
Well, I would, based on
I,
my experience, we had a discussion about that, and
I
and I
mean,
know you're not
Jesus.
going to give me some blowback because you have no reason to, because you can conceive of that possibility,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Um,
absolutely. If you looked at, did you see Interstellar?
yes.
Okay, so they got the physics right, and I was watching this about like four-dimensional tesseract and offset in time, and I'm looking at I'm like, who did this? This is amazing. And I look at the credits, and it says science advisor Kip Thorne. Kip Thorne was my professor at Caltech, who taught me Introduction to General Relativity, and got a Nobel Prize many decades later.
Oh,
I'm like,
now
okay,
that's a
now I
heartwarming. It's like, oh wow,
it was very heartwarming because he was a
yeah,
great
yeah.
professor. I loved him. But so the essence is that coming back to the 6 and 7 and on, we when like I think when you pass, I think you see the higher dimensions. I think maybe some people, of course, the lucky ones, maybe they can see them in dreams and whatnot. But
I think
it's
it's
just
even based on my, because I've explored a lot of things. I mentioned Jeffrey Mislev earlier and his, the dive into parapsychology and all of that, and I've had that as well. And yet I've also, I had a couple master's degrees in business, so I had hard skills, soft skills, and also the metaphysics. And well, you got to be balanced, right? You've got to be practical and pragmatic even though there is so much available, you still have to figure out how to bring it in, make it applicable, and then be able to share that in some way so that you don't appear too crazy.
completely agree with you. No, I totally agree with you.
So in
Yeah.
that craziness, we have this capacity, and especially speaking of practical, let's look at this, and this it's kind of a tangent, but not really. We had globally a chance to sequestrate and self-examine
Mhm.
when that pandemic happened.
Yes.
We didn't
Yes.
have a choice, right?
No.
And yet
Fortunately.
we still had choice because some people chose to binge watch instead of sitting with self and doing their self-examination. Those that did began having these questions of, something doesn't feel right. Who am I? What am I really? What do I believe in? What am I willing to do? Where's my passion at? And how do I want to grow with that in something where I can, and they haven't even thought about this yet, where I can take my skill sets that I've developed and apply them into an area that actually is energetically fulfilling.
Yes. And helps humanity, makes the world a little bit of a better place.
It seems like we were set up, if you want to call it divine intervention or what. We want to blame people for starting it. Who cares, right? That judgment, condemnation, criticism, just like Jesus said, it's worthless, right? It just gets you caught up in the distraction and not in the love.
With you. I think that's the essence, is that when we forget about the love, when we're competitive and we're focused on the day-to-day distractions that are all over the place,
Right.
I think we lose our humanity and we lose our purpose, our sense of wonder of the world, and what can we do to make it a better place. And I
STEM,
think
STEM programs won't necessarily bring that back. However, it does give an opportunity for developing critical thinking.
yes. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'm very thankful that I love math and that I love physics because, our physical world is based on physics essentially, and so
Mhm.
we are, our body is part of that physics, came about through that physics, and so it's a temple. And
Right.
so the point is,
Absolutely.
we do, if we want to survive in this world, you do need to understand logic. You need to understand the physics. So I think God gave us two gifts, logic and love. So love is what allows us to break beyond the barriers and couple and think outside of the box because we love something, because we're trying to solve something. Logic is what says, okay, now I can take what I've come with through love, through these ideas, through the transceiver concept, and now
Mhm.
I'm going to try and make it practical, which Tesla said.
And
Make it
work out some equations, right?
correct. I mean, I can't fly. I mean, I can fly if I go on a plane, but do you know what I mean? I'm tethered because of gravity and my body. I can fly in my mind and maybe in my spirit, but I'm
I wonder
tethered.
sometimes if these are just belief systems that we've locked into so deeply that we don't realize that we can't, right? And a
Well,
lot of things happen because we don't realize that it can't be done. It's just like, oh, I don't know, let's try it and find out,
the
right?
Wright brothers obviously had a belief that they could fly like a bird, and they, took quite a while, took a lot of effort, but they did. So
Now,
I do believe in that. Yes.
yeah, and even I don't remember the scientists' names, but the discovery of the Higgs boson, right? was developed by determining the signs of a particle decaying. They don't see the actual particle. They have this data that indicates that it's disappearing.
Chain
So
reaction.
I was in a discussion at Science Cafe with one of Lawrence Krauss's TAs. And I said to him, is it possible that what they saw as the decay of a particle was actually a rip in the fabric of dimensional fabric repairing? And I got a deer in the headlights look.
No,
I
that's a
hadn't
deep
even thought
question.
about that. Now,
Yeah.
that to me makes more common sense
Yes.
than a particle that's a fusion of two protons rammed together at near light speed.
Right. Very fast. Yeah.
But
Very
they
high
didn't
energy.
consider that. Why would you think that would happen? Because to me, it seems like they had a limited view because they wanted to find something, they were looking for it, and they found it
Correct. And I
based on
remember.
the statistics and the data, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I remember that story in the 80s. Carlo Rubia, I met him briefly when I went to Harvard when I was a
Mhm.
graduate student. And he was one, they wrote a book about him. It wasn't very positive, but about searching for that. Um, Basically, let me give you an example, okay,
Sure.
from the ancient Greeks. I believe it was Socrates, but correct me if I could be wrong. But he was a very well-known, well-loved scholar back in the day, ancient Greece, and he believed that the sun goes around the earth. And there was another scholar, and again, I forgot his name. I taught this many decades ago, but I forgot.
Sure.
And who
So
said,
you're
no, no,
pulling
no, no, no.
files, right?
Yeah, no, 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 no. The earth goes around the sun. But then Socrates or whoever this scholar was said, no, no, no. We would fall off. We would fall off. And that became the state of human understanding for millennia
Yeah.
until people like Copernicus and Kepler came about, and then ultimately Isaac Newton to pull it all together with this calculus that showed that it was wrong, that in fact the Earth was going around the sun. So what I'm trying to tell you is, unfortunately, even in science, we have, how do I say, mafia. We have people that they're the
Limitations.
they're the experts. They're the people that, oh, this person's like, God, they know everything, but they really don't. Okay. And so then people say, well, he or she said it, so it's got to be the truth. Well, then what happens is in physics, you find out that ultimately that theory may have been wrong. And it's cool. There's nothing to knock down the people. Technically
No,
Newton
not
was
at
wrong.
all, because they did the best with what they had, the knowledge they had.
Yeah, and it's incremental. It's like Zeno's
Yeah.
paradox. We're getting more and more understanding, closer and closer to the truth. So it's okay. So, I myself, I've had deep questions. I just got through an interview with an editor at the Daily Mail because they did a piece on the original piece in the Popular Republic, Popular Mechanics,
Mhm.
on this hyperdimensionality. And we went back and forth, and he's asking me very kind of like you. He's asking me deep questions like, where's your proof for hyperdimensionality? Well, actually, technically, I can't have proof because I need to do experiments
I
outside of
don't need
this
the proof. I
four-dimensional.
lived it, so I
Right,
know it exists. And
right,
I'm looking like, okay, how can we explain this to where we can bridge the spirituality and the science, have it
right,
make sense, and then
right.
make that sense common?
Right. And so we went back and forth, and I actually myself I came up with some interesting ideas about Einstein had this problem with the coupling of quantum particles. He called it spooky action and distance, but
Mhm.
it actually is very easy to solve when you get into hyperdimensionality or issues of our universe. If you analogize the universe to like a flat piece of aluminum foil, and you crumple it, that's kind of like, gravity crumples space-time. So you start out with what we call Euclidean space-time, you crumple it, and so there's your hyperdimensionality because you're forcing non-Euclidean curvature into a Euclidean space. That's
Right.
kind of hyperdimensional.
Well,
So,
that's like
but the
trying to
thing
put nonlinear into linear, right? And
by definition,
nothing is linear.
you
And all we have to do is just look at all the models that are available. Physical structures,
yeah,
rotating, we're spinning around the earth, we're, having a spiral around the sun, the sun's going around the center of the galaxy, and there's all these spirals happening. How the heck could that be linear?
Well, it's not linear. I mean, the physics can be linear, but I mean, so
Short
what I'm trying,
spaces, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's just, without getting too deeply into the physics, the point is that most of physics is linear, so it's stuff that we can solve. But there is nonlinear physics like chaos theory, like fluid mechanics, which is actually you can solve the
Well,
butterfly effect. And
isn't chaos just patterns we don't recognize yet?
correct. It just means we don't have sufficient mathematics yet to understand it, but it doesn't mean that it's not something that's beautiful. That's something
Yeah,
that
just
can,
like we don't have and we may now, I'm not
yeah,
aware of it, but we've got Kirlian photography, but we don't have anything that measures the size of an aura from
yeah,
that perspective. Now, there are pseudoscience tools like dowsing rods, where I've experienced the measurement of an aura in three different past, present, future, right? Past and future are both limiting. They're only about the diameter of the aura is only about 12 to 15 feet, maybe. Whereas in the present, it is almost 100 feet, if not more. And I've seen this demonstrated on several occasions. Now, is it pseudoscience? Maybe. Dowsing rods have been used for centuries, right? It's like
I
astrology. It's a science we haven't really learned how to accept and navigate through yet because originally we were told not to,
right.
right?
Well,
Like a little kid. Oh, don't do that. Well, that's the first thing I want to do. Figure
no,
out
absolutely. Me too. Me too, by the
why.
way. When people say no, I say, why not? And so, no, the essence is that's very similar to my wave theory. Is there something called evanescent waves, that all waves that are confined have a little bit of a penetration depth into a new medium, and the medium in this case would be the air around my head. So actually, there is sort of the beginnings of perhaps ESP, is that
Mhm.
that you do have a wave function that does permeate and an awareness outside of your brain. And I can explain it with just simple wave theory. I mean, it's very easy to understand. So, I mean, I don't, again, I'm a physicist, so I see things in a very concrete way, but I'm also an Orthodox Christian, so I'm good with the spirituality. But you know what
Right.
it's like? Is do you remember, like, if you go to the Vatican and there's a famous, I think it was Michelangelo who did this, there's a painting where there's man and he's sticking his finger out, and there's
Right.
God. He's
The guy
sticking his
touching
finger
it
out,
and the
and
spark in
they're trying
between
to
them.
touch. They're not quite there. That's the connection. Spirituality and science and religion do not have to, in my opinion, they don't contradict, they complement. They're different
Absolutely.
pieces
Well,
of thought.
they prove it from two different angles, the
Yeah,
physical and the spiritual,
yes,
or the
yes,
immaterial, or what let's just say energy, right? Because
yeah,
even in the physical form, it's still all energy. So we look at it more from a
yes,
condensed energy
correct.
and let's say
And
spectralized energy.
well, that's the energy I was mentioning that is in our stuck in our four-dimensional space-time 3+1 universe. But there's another energy that if you read the Bible, there was this, I'm sure you have it's called manna. There's this spiritual like food that God gave like
Right.
Moses that I can explain from God's energy, from this perfect energy that he's giving to the humans. And then I mean, I don't know the mechanism, but then somehow they
I
use
don't
it.
necessarily know it either. I know that when I'm in it, I have no thirst, no hunger.
Yes, that's the
My
fact.
energy is like
Yes, and you still
exponentiated.
have energy.
Yeah,
Yes. We have an icon of Saint Nicholas, who is the Western, they call him Santa Claus, but really it's a Saint Nicholas.
right.
And it's here in Vegas at a Orthodox mission, and it is streaming myrrh continuously. And it's a beautiful, sweet smelling myrrh. I can't articulate it. And often we get blessed. They'll put it like in the shape of the cross on our foreheads.
Right.
And that little miracle, which is so God, this is the way God does things. It's like in the manger, Jesus being born. Like you have to believe, but it's there to see. And it's been in my house, and it's been in my father-in-law's house, and it's like I can't explain it. It's a portal. It's a portal. Now from Saint Nicholas, but Saint Nicholas is of course connected with God, and he was the one that gave presents. That's where the Santa Claus,
Sure.
fantasy
But,
came.
but like Jesus said, right? We don't need any of that. We got a direct connect. We just haven't learned how to use it.
Right. And that's the Holy Spirit for me is that we pray. When you pray, you are opening that connection to God. And so that's why I think it's very important that we all pray, because, and I think even praying together is a good thing, because God will
Sure.
hear those prayers, in my
Well,
opinion.
is it possible to just develop a life that is a prayer?
Sure. I try and follow. Jesus gave the perfect example of the man who suffered and gave. He got nothing out of this world. Of all the people that lived on this planet, he got zero, and he gave everything. Almost, you know what I mean? Test is a lower version of that, but like
Yeah,
that.
well, he did demonstrate that everything he did, we could do and more. And
Yes.
then he even showed, okay, so I'm going to show you that even more. And he came back 40 days and then
Yep. And
had
he went
witnesses see him split,
hypersensual,
right?
and he
So
walked
if
through
he
water.
can do that, why
Yeah.
can't we? Now, there's a series of books, two different books series, one written by Byron Spalding. Scientists took a group of scientists, Southeast Asia, looking for the monks that were supposedly 600 to 800 years old to see if it was real. Found out it
Okay.
was. Then,
Okay.
but Guy Ballard, under the pen name Godfrey Ray King, wrote a series of books in the 1920s. Both of them, actually, these were written in the 20s. And Godfrey's experience, or Guy's experience with an ascended master known as Saint Germain, began on Mount Shasta. And
Mhm.
then he led him through all of these writings and showing him these additional spaces, of which Jesus was the key figure of, right?
Interesting.
So here's this interdimensional, intra-dimensional experience that we have the capacity to have. We just haven't allowed ourselves the freedom to explore it because we're
Yeah.
too tied into, hey, I got to make a living, I got to pay the bills, I got to take care of the wife and kids and cars and house and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
tremendously limiting on that expanded consciousness because it takes time,
Mhm.
sort of. I heard some references from other worlds, their view of time, that it's a measurement in the change of entropy.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying it's a change of energy as well. You can look at
Mhm.
converting energy and you can relate it. I just like the conversion of energy, because then it now makes sense that God's energy doesn't convert. And because in the
Speaking of
Bible,
entropy,
yes,
so you've got the entropy from the linear mind that says all systems go into decay. These are
correct.
man-made systems. That's what we've observed, because nature is cyclical. Nothing decays. I mean, right?
Mhm. Right.
So what if,
Nature's more like helical. So things will,
right,
it's got its cycles, but also nature is evolving. So you do have change, but it's a slow change.
sure. However, would you say that the universe is constantly refining itself, into greater order?
Well, let me give you an example. Okay. So if you look at, again, the Big Bang, initially, and there's a famous book, The First 3 Minutes by Steven Weinberg, who I also met when I was a graduate student at Harvard. He's got a Nobel Prize for
I am so
the.
fortunate to have this,
Oh,
uh, it's better than
no,
Kevin Bacon, right?
sure, sure. No, but he got a Nobel Prize for unifying electromagnetism with the weak nuclear interaction,
Mhm.
along with Sheldon Glashow and Abdus Salam. So the thing is, if you read his book, he explains in the beginning there was just energy, like these particles, like the Higgs boson, W particles, quarks, and they're in the soup. And then over time, things are cooling because the universe is expanding from the Big Bang. And then things cool. As they cool, now some of these particles start to condense. And
Mm.
so instead of you had protons, antiprotons, now you have just kind of more protons. And electrons, positrons, well, they're starting to condense. And now it's just kind of an offset of most of the electrons. At some point, you form hydrogen. Or like the protons and the neutrons. So neutrons are just protons and electrons together. So,
Right.
but the neutrons decay when they're free. So there's this critical time, like 11 minutes or something. All the neutrons are going to go and decay. Well, if they decay, then you're stuck with just protons. It's going to be a lot harder to synthesize matter, because matter needs neutrons.
Sure.
Because you know what I mean. Any like carbon's 12 is 6 protons, 6 neutrons. You need those to stabilize the nucleus. So
Well,
he's
there's the
like,
number of man, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons.
sure, exactly. You got it. You know this,
I've
okay?
known that for, gosh, most of my adult life, and it
Hydrochemistry.
just makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the point is that basically ever since that Big Bang, now the neutrons are decaying, but then they suddenly hook up with protons to form hydrogen nuclei, like
Hmm.
deuterium. Deuterium. Now the deuterium can start to fuse, and now you can build higher, like carbon, like oxygen, and so stars can form. So the essence is what you see is there's this creative process that's gone on since time t=0 of the universe, where you had to take billions of years for this hot gases that are expanding to, some of them condense and they start to form stars. They
Hmm.
get to a high pressure, high temperature, and then they start to synthesize nuclei. We are stardust. So there's no question that there is this order of synthesis of these molecules that ended up then. And I have my own research goes on to looking at how X-rays possibly actually synthesize the first organic molecules. And then with this is called astrobiology, those in outer space and like the civilized cold conditions of comets or asteroids, and they came to Earth and they
I
seeded
like
Earth.
how you said that, the civilized cold condition.
Yeah, well, not like in a star. In a star, nothing survives. It's all very hard. So it's
Good.
very low temperature chemistry. And so the essence is that once, like, you're old, you're obviously older than I am. You must remember the Paul Masson, "No wine before it's time."
Right.
Remember that commercial?
Oh, yeah.
So, because you were saying you were like 70s, I was in high school in the early 80s. So the point is that commercial is kind of the essence of life on this planet. This planet has been undergoing a creative process for billions of years.
Hmm.
And we wouldn't have been ready if we were around the dinosaurs. There wasn't a lot of soil. Everything was more hardcore, like trees, and then dinosaurs eating up all the small mammals. So we had to wait before we were ready to inherit this planet, because it took all this billion years of life kind of evolving until we were
Sure.
ready. And then when God saw what he was happy with, then he breathed his hyperdimensional breath into us, and we
Okay.
became Homo sapiens.
So so you brought up hydrogen, right?
Yes.
I love to talk about hydrogen in this perspective. So I'd mentioned earlier that I have a rich metaphysical experience. I'd questioned the origins of the Trinity because it's ubiquitous in all the major religions. So where did it come from?
Yes.
All right.
You can
So I
explain
was
that.
going through, I'd mentioned William Swigart and his methodologies, his techniques, multi-plane, multi-level awareness. I was getting ready to go through one day, and I had, and I'm going to get into really weird stuff. So in college, I read Castaneda's books, and I'd wondered if I had a guide or an ally. So I, prayed, asked a question. This old Indian shows up in my head one day, and I see his face, and I get the name Zephyr, and
Mhm.
along with a voice that was semi-recognizable. He had me write in what looked like Sanskrit, so I had no idea what the hell he said. But I wrote 3 pages of it one day. So I'm getting ready to go through this multi-level experience, and Zephyr shows up inside and he waves to me. He says, "Come." So I'm out of body. We're traveling across the universe. Stars go by for a little bit, then blackness, nothing. And we're talking along the way because I'm trying to figure out where he's taking me. And we're just basically doing a recap over the last few years that I hadn't seen him. So then all of a sudden we arrive at this 3 sun solar system with a dozen small green planets around it, planar orbits. And I feel like Ellie coming out of the wormhole, right? In Contact. I just was in
Yeah.
awe, tears streaming down my face.
Yes. Yeah. I remember that very
And
fondly.
as I'm watching, and this is at the perimeter, I hear one voice, many voices as one say, and 3, we
Mhm.
are not only your forefathers, we're also the forefathers of your solar system.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, exactly. So I wanted to ask questions. And Zephyr says, nope, that's it. You got all you need. You'll figure it out. So we turn and come back. on the way back, I already understood, the proton, electron, and neutron. That's the micro of the macro. Now, but hydrogen doesn't fit. Here's where I'm going with that.
Mhm.
Hydrogen is the most plentiful gas in the universe, powers the sun, and is the bonding agent for our DNA helix.
Mhm.
Now,
That's correct.
is it possible that consciousness flows through hydrogen?
Well, that's a great question. I mean,
Just based on that, I don't
yeah.
know. It
So
seems like a relevant question,
yeah, no, it's a very relevant
or
question. So
some kind of energy that transfers intelligence.
yeah. So there is a field of physics which actually relates very deeply to my what I've been talking about, my waves in human behavior,
Mhm.
called quantum biology. And this is something I'm grappling with right now, actually. Uh, that DNA, it's just, with the standard DNA ideas, that you have this helix that is, as you said, there's phosphate bonds, there's ribose, there's this basically hydrogen bonding is what is kind of holds it together.
Right.
And and of course, water being the solvent of life, the essence of water is that hydrogen bonding you're talking about.
And we're
So
70%.
right. And so
Wow.
there is a question, is that could there, for example, could there be something, let's say you're a member of a, I'm going to call them tribes because that's unfortunately how humans have broken into. So you
Right.
have a tribe that, let's say, suffered genocide. Is there something that gets put into your DNA quantum mechanically because of that suffering that changes your DNA? I mean, I would say first answer no, but I don't know. I just don't know because I wonder,
Well, because
is
it's a
there
collective experience, I would think there would be remnants in the energy everywhere. That doesn't mean that they affect things because we have choice, right?
yeah,
However, you've got those collective memories, memes, creodes, right?
correct?
That
Yeah,
permeate history that
yeah,
we then have the choices as to whether to continue to participate or make
correct.
a different choice.
I agree with you. It's all about choice. But all I'm saying is that if you look at different peoples in the world, we're all human beings, but there are still different characteristics that different
Oh,
peoples have.
absolutely. Diversity
And
is, you know,
And I think that it has to do with their environment. I think there was a coupling with the environment and whatever happened into that people that ends up, I don't know if it gets encoded or it's just like you said, it's some collective memories that get shared down the generations. But I'm grappling
or
with this
it's,
right now.
stored in the main computer and it's just there, right?
Absolutely.
It's in that
Absolutely.
cyberspace. Now,
Right. So I think I mean, I wouldn't say hydrogen directly, but hydrogen bonding, absolutely, that there is something that relates to our bodies. We are an eigenstate of this universe. Basically, whether you can just argue if you don't believe God directly was involved, that's fine. The point is God set up the conditions, the charge of the electron, the
or
protonic
something we
mass,
choose
that
because
everything,
we don't know
yeah,
what to call it, so we call it God, right? It's
sure,
something
sure.
so far beyond our
The higher
comprehension.
intelligence that Tesla
Right.
spoke of. The point is that this was designed. This universe was designed to support us, to create us, to
Absolutely.
and sustain us.
Well,
That's an
or
amazing
is it
concept.
possible that we were the creators of it and that now we've learned how to condense into form in order to experience it?
I can't
Yeah,
answer
don't
that.
know. Don't know.
That's a deep
Another thing
question.
I wanted to ask, um, back to the DNA helix, right?
Sure.
The symbol for yin and yang, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is it possible that that is a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional spiral that has that light pulsing through it in order to create
Sure.
the spin that allows us to condense into form
Let
or
me also
manipulate matter. These are things as we look further into our anatomy, our structure, and how it's reflected in the outer worlds, the ancients that have left us these, two-dimensional symbols that are like the primer in contact, right? The things are two-dimensional until you fold it together and goes, oh, wow, well, here's machine blueprints that we never saw.
that when you hit the moment of conception, when this egg and the sperm get together and they fuse their DNA, there's a flash,
Yeah.
light. And
Yeah.
if you saw Tom Cruise, the Risky Business, there's like this flash, and as they're doing that thing on the train, and you know what I mean. So it's like it's sort of figurative, whatever. But the point is that I believe that that's when your soul is created. That like if not to get too negative, but if if that child dies in birth, you're going to meet that child in heaven, in the afterlife. That is the full created soul right there in that moment.
Sure.
That's your
I'm
hiding
not sure
compartment.
about that. And referencing, Jesus on the Mount when he was talking to Moses and Elijah and, recognized it as, maybe part of the same. And, there's all kinds of references to reincarnation. Your answer book calls it repersonalization because you never fully reincarnate as the same being. You same essence, same soul, different framework from which you're advancing or hopefully, right? Um,
Hopefully, yes.
yeah,
You know
but
what?
there is too much evidence of that,
Hmm.
I mean, thousands of case studies about people who knew places that they shouldn't have because it was another life they had. So when you've got all this interconnectedness taking place, it would seem relevant that
Sure.
as we expand, that we begin to include these things that help us understand this hyperdimensional physics
Sure.
aspect of our own
Right.
being.
Right. Well, another way to look at that, if I can't say no, I don't know, but I mean, obviously, as an Orthodox
Interesting
Christian,
conversation, though, right?
it's interesting. But you can also tap into perhaps somebody's memories hyperdimensionally, either in the parallel universe concept, where let's say there's a universe 20 years behind us,
Yeah, but
and
don't we
you.
only have, I argue with that because we only have one point of reference, right? At any given moment, we only have one point of reference.
Yeah, you do. Unless if you split into multiple personalities, then you kind of lose that reference, and that's why it's a harder for people who go
Ye-
through.
Yes, and I often wonder if those are different aspects on those multiple dimensions that they're already hooked up to, and they just don't recognize it, and they choose. I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying it's possible that
Sure.
some of this, right? Because MPD, there's enough of it that I think in the spectrum, right, the bell curve, you've got the probably
Sure.
fourth standard deviation, right, that these
Yeah.
people occupy. And maybe I do too. So there's this playfulness in the fringe of a quasi um, functional place
Mhm.
because there is all or are all of these different aspects of the being that are being presented, and could this just be indicators of our own evolutionary process that we haven't learned how to deal with yet because we don't try to understand the person. It's like when I first had my awakening a year later, I got beat up at a frat house, ended up in the hospital. My parents decided to commit me. I told the doctor my experiences. I wanted somebody to listen to help me work through it. I was not going to deny its reality. He was wanting
Sure.
he was wanting me to deny my reality and
Understand.
drugging me to enforce that. Didn't work.
Yeah. Got
Um,
it.
so when you've got those kinds of things, if you can't, as a scientist, right, you
Yes.
step back, you
Yeah.
observe, and you ask questions. You don't
Correct.
reject.
Correct.
Now, how do you see this nature that we have of wanting to project our belief systems on everything else,
Right.
whether they're and then get stuck in the cognitive dissonance because we can't figure out why we're wrong.
Correct. Correct. Well, I mean, first of all, again, as an Orthodox Christian, I'm taught I don't proselytize. I mean, I have my point of view. I love to share it if people are willing to hear, but I'm not going to force it on people. And I'm certainly not going to be of the philosophy of some other people who believe that just because you happen to disagree with somebody's views, you have the right to, kill them or destroy them. Or I would never do that. That's what free will is all about, is you get the choice. No,
Right.
nobody should force the choice upon you. I'm just simply saying that I believe, first of all, there is overlap with all faiths, humans, which is weird, but, the
Is it?
concept,
Is
well,
it really that weird?
no,
Because
no, no,
like in
it's
the
not
liminal
weird.
space, right? We all know
No,
that liminal space
you said
is
it. Yes.
there, right?
I believe that the hyperdimensionality not only gives us the consciousness, it gives us conscience. So I believe we all have a
Absolutely.
conscience that comes from the
I would
creator
100%
directly.
agree with that.
And so that is where there has been an overlap on many religions. And I think the most important thing is that we want to treat each other as sons of children of God. Okay.
Sure.
And so that means that that's something, and that took me it seems so simple, but it actually took me a long time. I really just did not
It's
like
so
my
simple, it's
PhD.
complex, right?
And I was like, I couldn't believe that this guy that I thought was so horrible, how could you be a child of God? But you know what? You are. We all are. And I think if we all had that sense of mutual respect and that we help one another, that's the most important thing. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. It's about, are you helping one another? Do we love
Right.
each other? That's what made us survive on this planet. Each of us are survivors
There's
through the
another
generation.
guy. Absolutely. Well, we're more than survivors. We're co-creators. That's what we're designed to be.
Creators.
And we're even told we're gods and goddesses in embryo. We are sons and daughters,
Yes, yes,
right?
absolutely.
So if I'm saying I am God, like Jesus said, Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Didn't get into the Bible, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which has been a little more preserved over time, he says to
Yeah,
Thomas, don't ye know that ye are God as I am God?
yeah.
And that's basically what if you read between lines of the Bible, that's what he's saying. He's,
Like,
I am in him is the same as the I am in us.
right. And you know why? Because we're directly connected to the AM. We're on that bus. We're on that channel and that's what
Bozos
God's
or not, we're on the bus.
absolutely. And He said, what did God say? All that you seek will go through me. It all happens through me. We pray, we get the blessings, okay? Because we're connected to God. We're His hands in some sense. We're His servants. When in the Orthodox Church, when you die, they say servant of God. It's like we're serving each other.
Absolutely.
That's important.
Absolutely.
That's an important
You know,
concept.
and having the direct experience, the testimony like you were talking about, I have my own um, unequivocally mind-blowing
Yeah.
because he appeared to me in front of a group of people inside, right? And
Yeah.
several of them saw him, asked to speak through me. And the first question I get when I'm telling people this is, well, how'd you know it was him? Man, you cannot. It was the same sensation that I had in the white light in my
Wow.
experience as a teen, right? So you know that pureness, you feel it. There's no question. And here's this
Yes.
being that shows up, and there's a ray of light from his forehead, one from his heart, connects about 18 inches above me, bathes me in that effervescent, iridescent, high-pitched sensation, and he
Yes.
says, I would like to speak through you. Now, what do you do with that? I bawled like a baby. I didn't feel worthy
Yes.
until I did.
None of us are
Right. And
worthy.
then it's like, okay, I got to let go of all this stuff because here he is. I'm not going to lose this opportunity. No way. Right.
Right.
So
Period.
I release, I take a breath, I open my mouth. Now, the experience right before this was the facilitator had the group act as if Jesus was in our presence and talk to him. Right. They all had problems. I didn't. I just blurted out, hey, yo, dude, glad to have you here. Let's party. Right. I was 31. Right. So
Sure.
what else am I going to say? And then, so as I open my mouth to speak, he says, know that I am with you always. Duh. The second sentence, though, he says, this one's fear is great, talking about me. And I had a what you talking about Willis moment. And that bifurcated my consciousness. I continued talking to the group, and he
Yeah.
put me in a sidebar. And the first thing that he says to me is, your fears are the same as mine were,
Yeah.
about a humbling, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw a bunch of videos, vignettes, if you will, that flashed comparisons, contrasting, all that kind of stuff from both of us. And then I hear a branch break, and I open my eyes up, and there were 13 of us all together, probably 10 of the rest of them were looking at me with mouths gaping. I had no idea what I said. All I could do was hum afterwards when they would ask me questions because I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to bask in the
Sure.
feeling.
Sure. I don't think you talk in heaven. I think your communication is like through waves, like singing or something. Or even, it's just like, even just, you know what I
Right.
mean?
But those kinds of things, when you have that happen, I mean, I
Yeah.
stake my life on it, right? Don't care.
I, yeah.
And I'm not there to proselytize or convince. I'm just
Right.
saying, yo, the dude's weird. He's not like you think, right? He's
Right.
more personable. And I know this might fly ruffle your feathers a little bit, but he's not really a savior. We have that choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Well,
what
you do
and he
have the
showed
choice, but
us.
he
Well,
set
we
an
missed it.
example. Yeah. He set an
In my opinion, we missed the point. We're the one, he didn't have to die, but he had to die because he needed to demonstrate the ascension, which was that culminating event that he
Yeah.
shared so that we could all see the breadcrumbs.
Right. Hyperdimensional event. I
Yeah,
understand. I understand. He set an example, and all I want to do is follow that example because it was the
absolutely.
best
Absolutely.
example, and that
And do it in
starts with
our own
love.
unique ways. We don't have to be
Yes,
identical. We just
I
have to
agree.
have, like you said, as you ascend in consciousness, your
Yes,
conscience
yes,
also,
yes.
because it cannot survive at that higher vibratory state.
Completely agree. And the point is, we each have our own separate paths.
Yeah.
They're not. It's not one path like a snowflake. Not one path is ever going to be the same, and
No, I
that's
mean, but
good.
they're all instruments in the orchestra, and hopefully we've tuned our bodies well enough that we can
Yes,
not
symphony
just
of
play,
waves.
we can learn how to play in harmony.
I fully agree, and God willing, we will. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited, and the more physics I learn, the more excited I get.
Yeah. Oh man, time's flown.
Yeah.
I got away from
Oh
it.
yeah.
Michael, this has been such an amazing conversation and pleasure for me to have
Likewise.
somebody I can actually talk to about this
Thank
kind
you.
of stuff.
No, I enjoyed the conversation, and just keep the faith. We're going to get there. We
Always.
just have to just love one another. That's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you again, Michael. And
Thank you.
namaste and in la catch. And thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I know you had a great time with it because I sure did. And we will see you again next time.